The morning my son took me to the nursing home, he couldn't look me in the eyes. He kept both hands tightly wrapped around the steering wheel, staring at the road, as if every crack in the pavement mattered more than the woman who had given him life. I sat quietly beside him, holding my old brown handbag on my lap. Inside that bag were only a few things. A framed photograph of him when he was 6, my reading glasses, a worn Bible, and a small notebook with a leather cover. The notebook no one knew existed, not even my own son. I rested my hand over it without thinking. Maybe because somewhere deep inside, I already knew. One day, someone would finally read it. And when they did, everything they believed about me would change forever. If you've ever wondered whether love can survive betrayal, or whether forgiveness can arrive too late, stay with me, because this is not just the story of an old woman abandoned by her family. It's the story of a son who spent 20 years blaming the wrong person. My name is Margaret Collins. I turned 78 that spring. For most of my life, I believed I had done everything a mother was supposed to do. I wasn't perfect, no mother is. But every decision I made because I loved my child. Sometimes love doesn't look like kindness. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice. And sometimes it looks like becoming the villain in your own son's story. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. My son, Daniel, cleared his throat. "Mom." His voice sounded tired, not angry, just empty. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted." I smiled, a small smile. The kind mothers learn after decades of pretending everything is okay. "It's all right." He nodded without looking at me. "No," he whispered. "It isn't." Silence filled the car again. Outside, neighborhoods passed by. The bakery where we'd once bought cinnamon rolls after church. The baseball field where Daniel had hit his first home run. The elementary school where I'd waited outside every Friday with hot chocolate in winter. Every street held a memory. But memories don't stop time. When Daniel was little, he used to grab my hand whenever we crossed the road. Even after he turned 12, he'd squeeze my fingers and say, "Promise you'll never leave me." I always laughed. Where would I go? He'd grin. "I don't know. But promise anyway." I promise. Funny, life has a strange sense of humor. Because in the end, it wasn't me who left.
Please give it a like, subscribe. The nursing home appeared at the end of a quiet street. White brick, blue shutters. A small American flag moved gently in the breeze. The sign read, "Maple Grove Senior Living." It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, which somehow made it hurt even more. Daniel parked the car. Neither of us moved. Finally, he spoke. "I visited 6 places. This one had the best reviews." I nodded. "I'm glad. They have nurses 24 hours. Another nod. They have a garden. That's nice." He swallowed. "I'll visit every weekend." That sentence hung in the air. We both knew promises sometimes sounded better than reality. The truth was, Daniel hadn't become a cruel man. He had become an exhausted one. 49 years old, recently divorced, working 2 jobs, trying to pay college tuition for his daughter, Emma. His own blood pressure was climbing. His mortgage was months behind. Life had cornered him. And when people feel trapped, they often convince themselves they have no choice.
He stepped out first and hurried to open my door. For just a second, as he offered me his hand, I saw my little boy again. The one with scraped knees. The one who cried after nightmares.
the one who believed his mother could fix anything. I took his hand. His fingers trembled. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh coffee and lavender. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers. An elderly couple played chess near the fireplace. A volunteer arranged flowers. Everything was warm, organized, comfortable. And somehow, it made loneliness feel even louder. A cheerful administrator approached us. "You must be Mrs. Collins." Her smile was kind. "My name is Susan. We've been expecting you." She spoke gently, as if kindness could soften goodbye. Maybe sometimes it can, but not this time. Paperwork, insurance forms, medication lists, emergency contacts. I watched Daniel sign page after page. Every signature felt like another door quietly closing behind me. Finally, Susan handed him one last document. Family acknowledgement. He hesitated, only for a second. Then he signed. "I'll carry your suitcase." Daniel reached for my small bag. "No," I said softly. "I'll keep this one." He looked surprised. "It's light." "I know." He didn't ask why. If he had, he might have discovered the notebook. But he didn't. Susan led us to room 214. A window overlooked a small pond. There were ducks swimming peacefully. Someone had placed yellow flowers on the bedside table. "It isn't so bad," I whispered. Daniel looked relieved. "I told you." I smiled again, not because I believed him, because I wanted him to stop hurting. Even then, I was still trying to protect my son. He checked his watch. "I have to get back to work." Of course he did. Life doesn't stop breaking people just because someone else's heart is breaking too. He hugged me, quickly, almost awkwardly. Then he stepped back. "I love you, Mom." The words sounded practiced, like something he felt obligated to say. But I answered anyway. "I know." He turned toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped. Without facing me, he asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" The room became very still. I looked at the gray hair beginning to appear above his collar.
When had my little boy become an old man? "No, Daniel. I've never hated you. Not even once." His shoulders shook. He almost turned around. Almost. But instead, he walked away. The door closed softly behind him. And just like that, the house I had filled with laughter for 46 years no longer had a place for me. That evening, after dinner, I opened the drawer beside my bed. Carefully, I took out the old leather notebook. The first page was yellow with age. My handwriting looked younger than I remembered. At the top of the page, a date, October 14th, 1988. Beneath it, one sentence. If my son ever reads these pages, he'll finally learn why I chose to let him hate me. I closed the diary. Tears blurred my vision. Some truths are too heavy to tell until life decides the time is right. The first night in Maple Grove was the longest night of my life. Not because of the unfamiliar room, not because of the silence, but because every sound reminded me that I no longer belonged anywhere. The woman in the room next door cried in her sleep. Someone down the hallway coughed every few minutes. A nurse quietly pushed a medication cart across the polished floor. Life continued. Only mine had suddenly become very small. At 6 the next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains. I had always been an early riser.
For 40 years, I woke before everyone else, made coffee, packed lunches, ironed school shirts, prepared breakfast before Daniel even opened his eyes. Old habits never really disappear, even when there's no one left to cook for. I slowly got dressed and walked toward the dining room. Some of the residents smiled politely. Others stared into space. Many of them were waiting for breakfast, waiting for visitors, waiting for phone calls that rarely came, waiting for time itself to end. First day? A warm voice interrupted my thoughts. An elderly man with silver hair sat across from me. He wore suspenders and held a crossword puzzle. "I'm Frank." "Margaret." He smiled. "Don't worry. It gets easier." I smiled politely. "No, it doesn't." Frank chuckled softly. "You're honest." "Most people spend their first week pretending they're only here temporarily." "I suppose I don't have that luxury." Over the next few days, I learned everyone's routine. Helen knitted blankets for babies she'd never meet. George watched birds through the same window every afternoon. Eleanor played the piano every Friday.
Frank told terrible jokes. The nurses laughed anyway. I realized something. Nobody in this building was simply old. Each person had once been someone's whole world. A teacher, a soldier, a nurse, a mechanic, a mother, a father. Time had reduced them to room numbers, but their stories were still alive. Daniel didn't come that weekend. He called instead. "I'm sorry, Mom. Emma had a volleyball tournament. I'll come Wednesday." "It's all right." Wednesday became Friday. Friday became next week. Next week became, "I've just been so busy." Every excuse sounded believable, because they were. Life really was busy. That was what made loneliness so dangerous. No one meant to abandon you. It just happened. One postponed visit at a time. One afternoon, Susan found me reading in the garden. "You have a visitor." For one beautiful second, my heart leaped. Daniel. It had to be Daniel. Instead, it was Emma, my granddaughter. She had just turned 17. Tall, curly brown hair, freckles across her nose. She looked so much like her father at that age that it almost hurt. "Grandma!" She hugged me tightly, longer than Daniel had. "I missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart." She looked around the garden. "I didn't know it was this nice." "It is nice." "Then why do you sound sad?" Children, even when they grow older, they still hear what adults try to hide. I smiled. "I'm just getting used to it." She reached into her backpack. "I brought you blueberry muffins. My mom never learned your recipe." I laughed for the first time in weeks. No one ever does. We spent nearly 3 hours talking. School, friends, college applications, books. She talked non-stop, exactly like Daniel used to. Finally, she asked quietly, "Grandma, are you mad at Dad?" I looked toward the pond. "No." "Not even a little?" "No." She frowned. "I don't understand." Neither did he. Not yet. Before leaving, Emma hugged me again. "I'll come next weekend." "You don't have to." "I know. I want to." As she walked away, she turned back. "I love you." This time, the words didn't sound practiced. They sounded real. I whispered them back. That evening, I opened my diary again. Another date, March 3rd, 1994. Daniel was 12 years old. The memory hit me as clearly as if it had happened yesterday.
He had burst through the front door carrying a report card.
"Mom, I got straight A's!" I wrapped him in my arms. "I knew you could." He grinned proudly. "Can we tell Dad first?" My smile froze. His father, Michael, hadn't lived with us for almost a year. Daniel didn't know why. He believed his father had left because I had asked him to, because that was the story Michael wanted him to believe, and I had allowed it. That evening, Michael picked Daniel up for dinner. When they returned, Daniel refused to look at me. "I don't want to talk to you." My heart sank. "What happened?" "You ruined our family." Those words, coming from a 12-year-old, cut deeper than any knife. I looked at Michael. He stood behind Daniel, silent, watching. He knew exactly what he had done. He had planted the poison, and I had said nothing. The truth was far uglier. Michael hadn't left because of me. He had left because he had another family, another woman, another child. He had been living two lives for years. The night I discovered it, he begged me not to tell Daniel. "Please, don't make him hate me. He needs his father, and if he finds out, he'll never forgive me." I stared at the man I'd once loved. What about me? What happens when he hates me instead? Michael lowered his head. "I know it's unfair. I'll fix it." But he never did. Instead, he quietly allowed our son to believe that I had destroyed our family. Why didn't I tell Daniel? People ask that question all the time. The answer isn't simple. Because when you're a mother, sometimes protecting your child feels more important than protecting yourself. I couldn't bear the thought of my 12-year-old son discovering his father had chosen another family. I wanted him to keep at least one parent he could admire, even if that meant losing him myself. The diary pages trembled in my hands. Ink stains marked several paragraphs. I'd cried while writing them. Even then, 32 years later, the paper still carried those tears. Outside my room, someone knocked gently. It was Frank. "You all right?" I quickly closed the diary. "Yes." He looked at me for a long moment. "You know, the hardest part about getting old isn't losing your health. It isn't wrinkles. It isn't pain. It's carrying memories no one else knows." I stared at him. He had no idea how right he was. Not one person in that building knew the truth. Not Daniel, not Emma, not even my closest friends. Only these worn pages. And someday, I hoped they would find their way into my son's hands, because when they did, he would finally understand that the mother he spent 20 years blaming had actually spent 20 years protecting him.
By December, I had memorized every sound inside Maple Grove. The soft buzz of the elevator, Frank's laugh echoing through the hallway every morning, Helen humming Christmas hymns while she knitted scarves no one had asked for. Life had settled into a routine, comfortable, predictable, lonely. But Christmas changes everything, especially for people who are waiting. The nursing home transformed almost overnight. Volunteers decorated every hallway with garlands. A 12-foot Christmas tree stood in the lobby, covered in white lights and handmade ornaments from local school children. Someone placed a wooden sign beneath it. "Home is where love lives." I stared at those words for a long time. Sometimes, the cruelest thing in the world isn't a lie. It's the truth you no longer recognize.
Every resident secretly counted visitors. No one admitted it, but everyone watched the front door. Every time it opened, heads turned. Would it be a son, a daughter, a grandchild, a friend? Most of the time, it was another delivery. On Christmas Eve, the dining hall was full. Families hugged, children laughed, grandchildren ran between tables. Nurses carried trays of turkey and mashed potatoes. The room overflowed with joy and heartbreak. Because for every resident surrounded by family, another sat quietly alone, pretending they didn't mind. Frank adjusted his red sweater and smiled at me. "Your family coming?" "They're busy." He nodded. "So are mine." Neither of us asked another question. Some conversations don't need words. At noon, Susan walked through the dining room carrying a clipboard. She smiled each time she called a name. "Mrs. Henderson, your daughter is here." "Mr. Blake, your grandson just arrived." Cheers, tears, laughter, then silence again, until, "Mrs. Collins?" My heart skipped. I stood, only to hear, "You have a package." Not a visitor, a package. Inside the box was a warm blanket, a Christmas card, and a gift card to my favorite bookstore. The handwriting was Daniel's. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Things have been crazy. Love, Daniel."
No signature could hide the distance between us. I folded the card carefully, smiled, and thanked Susan. Then I excused myself before anyone could see my eyes filling with tears. Back in my room, I opened the closet. On the top shelf sat a small cardboard box. Inside were Christmas ornaments, old ones, each wrapped in newspaper. I had brought them with me without thinking. One tiny wooden angel, a ceramic snowman Daniel painted in 2nd grade, a crooked paper star he insisted belonged at the very top of our tree. I held the little snowman in my hand. The blue paint had faded, but I remembered the day he made it. He had come running through the front door. "Mom, don't look!" "Why not?" "It's a surprise!" He hid something behind his back, then proudly held up the world's ugliest snowman. One eye was larger than the other. The scarf was glued upside down. Half the paint had ended up on his shirt. "It's beautiful," I said. He frowned. "No, it isn't." "It looks weird." I knelt beside him. "You know why it's beautiful?" "Why?" "Because you made it." His little face lit up. "Promise you'll keep it forever?" "I promise." And I had. Even now, 35 years later. That afternoon, Emma arrived. Out of breath, snowflakes clung to her coat. "I'm sorry I'm late." She hugged me tightly. Again, longer than anyone else. "I told Dad we should come together." "What did he say?" "He said he had work." She didn't sound angry, just disappointed. We walked slowly through the garden, now covered in fresh snow. Everything looked peaceful. Emma slipped her arm through mine. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did Dad always have trouble saying how he feels?" I smiled sadly. "No. He used to tell me he loved me 20 times a day." "What changed?" I looked toward the frozen pond. "Life." Emma hesitated. "Sometimes I think Dad carries something heavy. He gets quiet whenever Grandpa's name comes up." I stopped walking. Michael. Even after all these years, his shadow still followed us. He loved his father very much. Emma looked confused. But Grandpa left. Didn't he? Yes. Then why does Dad still defend him? Because he doesn't know. The words formed inside my mind, but never reached my lips. Instead, I simply answered, sometimes we protect the memories we're afraid to lose.
That evening after Emma left, I couldn't sleep. I reached for the diary again. Another date, December 24th, 1997. Daniel was 15, old enough to drive soon, old enough to question everything, but still too young to understand adults. Michael had shown up unexpectedly that Christmas Eve. He stood on the porch holding an expensive bicycle, exactly the one Daniel had wanted. Our son nearly cried with excitement. "Dad!" Michael hugged him. "Merry Christmas, buddy." I noticed something strange. He kept checking his watch every few minutes, as though he needed to be somewhere else. Because he did. He had another Christmas waiting, with another family. Daniel spent the entire afternoon riding the bicycle through the neighborhood, laughing, smiling, believing his father was the greatest man alive. When he finally came inside, Michael was already leaving. "So soon?" Daniel asked. "I have business." Our son looked disappointed. Michael hugged him, then looked at me, just for a second. There was guilt in his eyes, but not enough to change. Later that night, Daniel found me crying quietly in the kitchen. "Why are you crying?" "I'm just tired." "No. You always cry after Dad leaves." I forced a smile. "It's nothing." He frowned. "I think you still love him." I looked away. If only he knew. Love had disappeared years earlier. What remained was grief. Grief for the family we almost had. The next diary page was different. The handwriting shook. The ink was smeared. Across the top I had written only one sentence. "Today I learned the truth, and I don't know how to survive it." I closed the diary. My hands were trembling, because I knew what came next. The day everything changed forever. The day Michael called me from a hospital. The day he begged me to make one final promise. A promise that would cost me my son's love for the next 20 years. And I kept it, even though it broke me. I have often wondered whether a single promise can change the course of an entire family. The answer is yes. Sometimes it saves people. Sometimes it destroys the one who keeps it. It was February 18th, 1998, just after midnight. The phone rang. Back then, phones didn't usually ring after midnight unless something terrible had happened. I knew it before I answered. My hands were already shaking. "Hello?" For a few seconds, only heavy breathing. Then, "Margaret." "Michael." His voice sounded weak, broken, as though every word hurt. "I'm at St. Luke's Hospital. There was an accident." I drove through the snow as fast as I could. Every red light felt like an eternity, every mile, filled with memories I wished I'd never lived. When I reached the emergency room, a nurse met me at the entrance. "Are you Margaret Collins?" "Yes." "He asked for you." Michael looked nothing like the man I'd divorced. His face was pale. One arm was covered in bandages. Machines surrounded his bed. A monitor beeped steadily beside him. He smiled when he saw me. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I pulled a chair closer. "I almost didn't." He nodded. "I deserve that." For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Two people who had once planned an entire future,
now couldn't even find a sentence. Finally, he whispered, "The truck crossed the center line. They don't know if I'll make it." I looked away. I wanted to feel anger. Instead, I felt tired. So very tired. "I need to tell you something." His eyes filled with tears. "You already know. I had another family." "I know." "You knew?" "I found out years ago." He closed his eyes. "And you never told Daniel?" "No." "Why?" I answered without hesitation. "Because he deserved one parent he could still admire." Michael began crying. Real tears. Not excuses, not manipulation. Just regret. "I don't deserve your kindness." "No, you don't. But this isn't about you. It's about our son." He reached beneath his pillow. Slowly, painfully, he pulled out a thick envelope. My will, my insurance, everything. I frowned. "What do you want me to do?" He looked straight into my eyes. "Promise me. Promise Daniel never finds out." My heart stopped. "What?" "He must never know about the other family. He'll hate me. He'll hate everything we shared. He'll think every birthday, every fishing trip, every hug was a lie." I stood up. "No, I'm not making that promise. You made your choices. You don't get to hide from them now." Michael's breathing became uneven. "Please. For him. Not for me." The room fell silent. I thought about 12-year-old Daniel, running toward his father after Little League games, waiting by the window every other weekend, keeping Father's Day cards under his pillow. Could I really destroy every happy memory he had? Would the truth heal him or break him? "I don't know," I whispered. Michael reached for my hand. His fingers were ice cold. "Please, if I die, let him remember the father he loved, not the man I really was." The doctor entered. They needed to take Michael for emergency surgery. As nurses rolled the bed toward the operating room, he looked back one final time. "Promise me." For several endless seconds, I couldn't speak. Then, very quietly, I nodded. "I promise." Those two words would cost me 20 years with my son. Michael died 3 hours later. He was 46 years old. At the funeral, Daniel stood beside the coffin wearing a black suit 2 sizes too big. He didn't cry, not once. He simply stared, as though waiting for his father to wake up. When the service ended, he walked over to me. His eyes were red. His voice was trembling. "This is your fault." The words hit me like a punch. "What? You divorced him. You pushed him away. You made him lonely. If you hadn't, he'd still be alive." The church became completely silent. Every face turned toward us. I could have ended it right there. One sentence. "Daniel, your father had another family." Everything would have changed. Instead, I remembered my promise. I closed my eyes and remained silent. That silence became my prison. Over the years, Daniel repeated that story so many times. Eventually, he believed it completely. His friends believed it. His wife believed it. Even Emma, though she was always too kind to say it aloud. In every version of our family's history,
I became the woman who destroyed her marriage. The woman who drove away a good husband. The woman who made a son grow up without a father. Only I knew the story had been upside down all along. Back in my room at Maple Grove, I gently closed the diary. Outside the window, snow continued falling, soft, silent, beautiful. Just like lies, they cover everything until spring arrives. The next morning, Susan knocked softly on my door. "Margaret?" "Yes?" "There are two gentlemen here asking about you." I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. They said they're lawyers. Lawyers? My heart began to race. I hadn't spoken to an attorney in over 20 years. Who could possibly be looking for me now? When I walked into the reception area, one of the men stood and introduced himself. "Mrs. Collins, my name is Robert Hayes. I represent the estate of," he glanced down at the folder, "Michael Anderson." My breath caught. That wasn't possible. Michael had died 20 years ago. Then why was his name suddenly back? And why did the lawyer look so nervous?
For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The name echoed through the reception area. Michael Anderson. 20 years. 20 long years since I had stood beside his grave. 20 years since I had buried not only my former husband, but the truth. The attorney extended his hand. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Collins. I believe this meeting is long overdue." Susan led us into a quiet conference room. The younger attorney opened a leather briefcase while Robert remained standing. "You probably have many questions." "I have only one," I answered. "Why now?" Robert took a slow breath. "Because, until last month, we couldn't find you." He slid a thick folder across the table. "My client left detailed instructions. He specifically requested these documents remain sealed until..." He looked down again. "His youngest daughter turned 21. I frowned. My youngest. Then it hit me. Not our daughter. His other daughter. The child from the second family. She was finally an adult. The legal restriction had expired. Robert continued. "Only then were we permitted to contact you." I stared at the folder. My hands refused to touch it. "What is it?" "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" "The truth." For several seconds, neither attorney spoke. Finally, Robert said quietly, "Mrs. Collins, Michael recorded everything." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "There are letters, financial records, medical documents, and," he hesitated, "video recordings." Video recordings. I suddenly remembered the old camcorder Michael carried everywhere during the last year of his life. Birthday parties, baseball games, Christmas mornings. He had filmed everything. I thought he simply wanted memories. Apparently, he wanted something else. Robert carefully placed an old flash drive on the table. He left one instruction. If Daniel ever learns the truth, he must see this. I looked away. "No." Robert blinked. "I'm sorry?" "No. He doesn't need to know." The younger attorney looked genuinely confused. "But you've lived with this misunderstanding for decades." "I know. Wouldn't you like your son to finally understand?" I smiled sadly. "More than anything." "Then why refuse?" "Because mothers don't stop protecting their children, even when they're 78, even when they're tired, even when no one notices. I folded my hands. My son already lost his father. I'm not taking away the man he remembers. Robert stared at me, then quietly asked, "Do you still love him?" For a second, I wasn't sure which man he meant. Michael or Daniel? My son? Always. My ex-husband? I thought for a long moment. No. But I forgave him. Robert slowly nodded. I think Michael knew you would answer exactly like that. He reached into the folder. This letter is for you. The rest, he paused, are for Daniel. I recognized Michael's handwriting immediately, even after 20 years. Some things never leave your memory. The envelope simply read, Margaret, nothing else. I opened it carefully. Dear Margaret, if you're reading this, then I failed. I always believed I would survive long enough to tell Daniel myself. I wanted him to know I loved him, but I also wanted him to know that you were never the reason our family fell apart. I was. Every lie, every betrayal, every broken promise belongs to me, not to you. My vision blurred. The letter continued. You asked me once what my greatest regret was. It wasn't the affair. It wasn't losing our marriage. It was watching our son slowly stop trusting the only parent who truly deserved his love. Every time he blamed you, I died a little more inside. Yet I remained silent. I was a coward. A tear landed on the paper. If Daniel ever learns the truth, tell him this. His mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She protected me, even after I destroyed her life. I never deserved that kind of grace. I couldn't read anymore. The words dissolved beneath my tears. For 20 years, I had wondered whether keeping my promise had meant anything. Now I knew. Michael had carried the weight too, until his final breath. Robert quietly placed a tissue beside me. There is something else. I looked up. The other family. My stomach tightened. What about them? They didn't know either. What? They believed Michael traveled constantly because of work. He lied to everyone. I closed my eyes. How many lives had one lie destroyed? Mine, Daniel's, Michael's, another woman's, another child's. The truth had not divided one family. It had shattered two. Robert gathered the papers. I won't pressure you, but I strongly recommend. He gently tapped the folder, that your son eventually receives these. After they left, I carried the folder back to my room. I locked the door, placed everything inside the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Then, I took out my diary. There was only one empty page left, just one. I uncapped my pen and began writing. July 12th. If you're reading this, Daniel, it means I'm no longer here to explain any of it. Please don't waste your life hating your father. He was deeply flawed, but he loved you in the only broken way he knew how. And please, don't waste another day feeling guilty about bringing me here. A building never broke my heart. Silence did. Pride did. Time did. But never you. You were always the greatest gift God ever gave me. My hands trembled as I wrote the final sentence. If I had to live my entire life again, I would still choose to be your mother. I closed the diary.
placed it on top of the attorney's folder. For the first time in many years, I felt strangely peaceful. Because somewhere deep inside, I sensed the truth had finally begun moving toward my son, even if neither of us knew it yet. 3 days later, Daniel received a phone call at work. It wasn't from me. It wasn't from Maple Grove. It was from St. Luke's Hospital archives. A clerk had found a sealed storage box during a renovation. The label carried only one name, Michael Anderson, and beneath it, one instruction: deliver personally to my son, Daniel. Daniel had no idea that opening that forgotten box would destroy everything he believed about his parents. Daniel almost ignored the phone call. He had been in the middle of reviewing contracts when his assistant knocked gently on his office door. "There's someone from St. Luke's Hospital online too." He frowned. "Hospital? They said it's about your father." For a moment, time stopped. His father had been dead for over 20 years. What could a hospital possibly want now? "Mr. Collins," a calm voice greeted him. "My name is Laura Simmons. I'm the records supervisor at St. Luke's. We recently renovated an old storage room. There was a locked cabinet scheduled for disposal." Daniel listened quietly. "Inside, we discovered several sealed boxes belonging to former patients. One of them was labeled with your father's name." He rubbed his forehead. "There must be some mistake." "There isn't. Your father left written instructions." "It specifically says," she paused, "deliver personally to my son, Daniel Collins." Daniel stared through the glass wall of his office. Employees moved around outside. Phones rang. Printers hummed. The entire world continued moving, while his own seemed frozen. "When can I pick it up?" "Any time." That evening, instead of driving home, he drove to the hospital. The archives department sat in the oldest part of the building. The walls smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. Laura met him carrying a medium-sized cardboard box. Its tape had yellowed with age. Dust covered the edges. Across the front, his father's handwriting. Daniel. Nothing else. "Has anyone opened it?" Daniel asked. Laura shook her head. "No." It remained sealed under legal instructions. She handed him a release form. After signing, he carried the box to his truck. He didn't open it there. Somehow, it felt too important. At home, Emma noticed it immediately. "Dad?" "What's that?" "I'm not sure." She sat beside him at the kitchen table. "Can I stay?" He nodded. "I think I'd like that." The tape cracked as he carefully lifted the lid. Inside, everything had been packed with incredible care. An old leather wallet, several VHS tapes, photo albums, letters, medical records, and one small envelope. It simply read, "Open this first." Daniel unfolded the letter. His father's familiar handwriting filled the page. "My son, if you're reading this, then I never found the courage to tell you the truth while I was alive. That failure belongs to me, no one else." Daniel swallowed. Emma quietly reached for his hand. He continued reading. "Before you read anything else, I need you to know one thing. Your mother never destroyed our family. I did." Daniel stopped. His breathing became uneven. "What?" Emma whispered. "Dad." He shook his head. "No. This can't be right." His eyes raced across the next paragraph. "She protected me. She protected my reputation. She protected the image you had of me." And I repaid her by allowing you to believe she was responsible. The paper slipped from his fingers. It floated silently onto the table. Emma picked it up. She continued reading aloud because Daniel no longer could. Every time you blamed your mother, I deserved those words, not her. Every time you looked at me with admiration, I wanted to confess, but I was too weak. Emma's voice broke. She looked at her father. Tears streamed down his face. For the first time since she was a little girl, she saw him cry.
"No," he whispered. "No. This isn't possible." "I would have known," Emma answered softly. "Would you?" Daniel remembered. Every argument, every accusation, every cold conversation with his mother, every holiday he skipped, every phone call he ended too quickly, every visit he postponed, every disappointed look in her eyes, every single memory suddenly looked different. His hands began shaking uncontrollably. There has to be more. He reached deeper into the box. Another envelope, labeled, "For Margaret," unopened. He stared at it. Why had his mother never received it? Then he remembered. She had moved several times after selling the house. The hospital had never found her. Beneath the envelopes lay 6 videotapes, each carefully labeled. Daniel's 10th birthday, Christmas 1996, fishing trip, hospital room. His heart stopped. Hospital room. He inserted the old tape into the VHS player Emma had rescued from the attic years earlier. Static filled the television. Then his father's face appeared. Older, thinner, sitting in a hospital bed, looking directly into the camera. "Daniel," Michael smiled weakly. "If you're watching this, I'm already gone. I hope you become a better man than I was." Daniel couldn't move. "I've lied to you. For many years. I told myself it was to protect you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself." Michael lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I betrayed your mother." "Repeatedly." "She never betrayed me." "Not once." Daniel's entire body went numb. The room disappeared around him. Only the television remained. Only his father's voice. "I begged her," Michael continued. "I begged her to let you hate her. I asked her to protect my memory." "I had no right." "But she still did it." "She sacrificed her own relationship with you, so you could keep loving me." Daniel covered his mouth. A broken sob escaped before he could stop it. Michael looked directly into the camera. "If you ever blame anyone..." "Blame me." "And if your mother is still alive..." He paused, crying openly now. "Go. Hug her. Before time steals that chance from you." The tape ended. The screen turned blue. Silence filled the house. No one spoke, not for several minutes. Finally, Emma whispered, "Dad?" He stared at nothing. "I put her there." "What?" "I put her in Maple Grove." His voice barely existed. "I left her." "Completely alone?" Emma squeezed his shoulder. "You can still fix this." Daniel slowly shook his head. His eyes were empty. "What if..." "I'm already too late?" Daniel didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. He sat alone in the living room until sunrise, surrounded by the contents of the cardboard box. The letters, the videotapes, the photographs. Every piece of evidence stripped away another layer of the story he had believed for more than 20 years. By dawn, the father he had admired had become a deeply broken man, and the mother he had quietly blamed had become someone he barely recognized. Not because she had changed, because he had never truly known her. At 6:12 a.m., Daniel grabbed his car keys. Emma hurried downstairs. "Where are you going?" "To Maple Grove." "I'm coming with you." He didn't argue. He was grateful not to be alone. The highway was nearly empty. Rain fell softly against the windshield. Daniel drove faster than he should have. Every red light felt like an enemy. Every slow driver felt unbearable. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "I keep hearing his voice," he whispered. Emma looked at him. "Grandpa's?" Daniel nodded. "Go. Hug her." Those words echoed over and over inside his mind. Then another memory surfaced. He was 7 years old. A thunderstorm had frightened him awake. He had climbed into his mother's bed. She wrapped him in her arms and whispered, "Storms always pass." He had believed her, without question, because when you're 7, your mother knows everything. Then came another memory. He was 15, angry, confused, standing in the kitchen. "I wish Dad had married someone else." He remembered saying it, word for word. He remembered watching the color disappear from his mother's face. She hadn't defended herself. She hadn't argued. She had simply whispered, "I'm sorry you feel that way." At the time, he thought she was admitting guilt. Now, he understood. She had been apologizing for a pain she hadn't caused. Daniel began crying again. "I said terrible things." Emma reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You didn't know." "I should have. I never even asked her side." The words hit him harder than anything else. He had spent decades believing one version of the story, without ever asking his mother to tell hers. Maple Grove appeared ahead. The familiar white building, the blue shutters, the American flag. The same place where he'd left her months earlier. Only this time, his heart pounded with fear. He rushed through the front doors. Susan looked up from the reception desk. "Daniel? I need to see my mother." Something in his voice made Susan's smile disappear. She stood slowly. "I'm sorry." "No," he interrupted. "I don't have time." "Please, I just need to see her." Susan lowered her eyes. Daniel suddenly noticed she looked heartbroken. His stomach tightened. "No," he whispered. "No." Susan walked around the desk. "I'm so sorry." His legs became weak. "Please, don't say it. Please." "Your mother became ill 3 nights ago." Daniel couldn't breathe. "We transferred her to St. Anne's Medical Center." His entire body relaxed for one brief second. She was alive. Alive. "Which room?" Susan hesitated. "Daniel, she asked us not to call you." The words struck him like lightning. "What?" "She didn't want to interrupt your life." Emma covered her mouth. Susan continued quietly. She said, "My son already carries enough burdens. Don't give him another one because of me." Daniel broke completely. He sank into one of the lobby chairs, covering his face with both hands, sobbing. Not polite tears, not quiet tears. The kind that come from years of regret crashing down all at once. "I abandoned her," he whispered. Susan knelt beside him. "No, you made a mistake. Those are different things." Daniel looked up. "My whole life, I thought she never fought for us. Susan smiled sadly. Your mother fought for everyone, even when no one fought for her. She walked behind the reception desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a worn leather notebook. Daniel froze. The diary. Susan held it carefully. She asked me, if anything ever happened, to give this to you. Daniel stared at it, unable to move. Susan placed it gently into his hands. It's yours now. His fingers trembled as he opened the cover. The first page read, If my son is reading this, then God has finally answered the prayer I prayed every night. Daniel's vision blurred instantly. He turned another page. Every entry began the same way. Dear Daniel, not Dear Diary, not today. Every page had been written to him
For decades. Letters he had never known existed. One entry stopped him cold. May 18th. Today, Daniel forgot Mother's Day. I know it wasn't intentional. Life is busy. I hope he isn't feeling guilty. If he remembers tomorrow, I'll pretend that's when Mother's Day was. Daniel covered his mouth. He hadn't forgotten. He had chosen not to call because he had been angry, and she had protected him, even inside her private diary. Another page. August 3rd. Daniel looked exhausted today. He smiled, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I wish I could still fix his problems the way I did when he was little. Mothers never stop wanting to rescue their children. Then another. December 25th. Daniel couldn't visit today. I hope he laughed. I hope Emma smiled. I hope they had enough to eat. Christmas is easier when the people you love are happy, even if they aren't with you. Daniel couldn't continue. He hugged the diary tightly against his chest, like a child holding on to the only thing left of home. Emma quietly wiped away her tears. Dad, we have to go. He nodded. Yes. He stood, holding the diary, the letters, and the weight of 20 years. As they hurried back toward the parking lot, neither of them noticed the small handwritten note that had slipped from between the diary's pages. It landed silently on the lobby floor. Susan picked it up. Her eyes widened. On the front, Margaret had written only 6 words. Open only after I am gone. The drive to St. Anne's Medical Center felt endless. Daniel didn't remember a single traffic light. He couldn't remember turning, or stopping, or breathing. The only thing he could hear was his mother's voice through the pages of the diary. I hope my son isn't feeling guilty. Every sentence shattered him, even in private, even where no one would ever read. She had never blamed him, not once. Emma sat quietly beside him. She had never seen her father like this. Growing up, Daniel Collins had always been the strong one, the dependable one, the man who solved every problem. Now, he looked like a frightened little boy. Dad, she whispered, what are you thinking? Daniel stared at the road. I'm trying to remember. The last time I hugged my mother because I wanted to? Not because it was expected, not because it was Christmas, not because someone was watching, just because she was my mom. He couldn't remember. The hospital parking lot was almost full. Daniel didn't wait for the elevator. He ran toward the stairwell, 2 steps at a time. Emma struggled to keep up. By the time they reached the 4th floor, Daniel was out of breath. His heart wasn't racing from running. It was racing from fear. At the nurse's station, he spoke between breaths. Margaret Collins. What room? The nurse looked at the computer, then smiled gently. You must be Daniel. His stomach tightened. Yes. She talked about you every day. Those words nearly brought him to his knees. Every day. After everything. Room 417. The number felt enormous. Daniel stood outside the door, unable to move. Emma touched his arm. You can do this. He shook his head. I don't deserve to. Before he could knock, the door opened. A doctor stepped outside. He looked tired. Family? I'm her son. The doctor nodded slowly. I'm Dr. Harris. Your mother has pneumonia. It's become very difficult for her body to fight infections. Daniel's voice cracked. Is she? The doctor answered honestly. She's very weak. But she's awake. You should go in. Daniel pushed the door open, slowly. The room was quiet. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds. Machines hummed softly. Margaret lay peacefully in bed. She looked smaller, fragile. Nothing like the woman who had carried groceries with one hand while holding his tiny fingers with the other. Age had taken so much, but not her kindness. Even asleep, her face looked gentle. Daniel whispered, Mom. Her eyelids moved, slowly. She opened her eyes. For a moment, she looked confused. Then she smiled. The same smile. The one that had welcomed him home every day after school. Oh, she whispered softly. You came. Not, why now? Not, where have you been? Just, you came. Daniel collapsed beside the bed. I'm so sorry. The words burst out before he could stop them. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Margaret slowly lifted her trembling hand. She placed it against his cheek, exactly the way she had when he was 5 years old. Daniel, look at me. He couldn't. He was crying too hard. Finally, he looked up. I know, he whispered. I know everything. Margaret closed her eyes. For several seconds, she said nothing. When she opened them again, there were tears in them. So, you finally met your father. Daniel frowned. What? The real one. He nodded. The letters, the videos, the diary. I blamed the wrong person. Margaret gently shook her head. No, you blamed the story you were given. Those aren't the same thing. Daniel buried his face in the blanket. I wasted 20 years. No, she answered. You lived 20 years. Wasting them would mean you learned nothing. He looked at her. I don't deserve your forgiveness. She smiled. My dear boy, you've had it since the day you were born.
Emma quietly stepped into the room. Margaret reached toward her granddaughter. Emma hugged her carefully. I love you, Grandma. I know, Margaret smiled. You always made sure I knew. For a long while, none of them spoke. They simply stayed together, 3 generations, finally, without lies standing between them. As evening approached, Margaret looked toward the window. The snow stopped. Daniel followed her gaze. The sky had turned golden. I used to love sunsets, she whispered. You still can, he answered. She smiled. Not for much longer. Daniel grabbed her hand. Please don't say that. She squeezed his fingers weakly. Daniel, there is something I need you to promise me. His heart sank. No, I'm done making promises. They only hurt people. Margaret laughed softly. The sound was almost musical. "This one won't. I want you," she paused to catch her breath, "to forgive your father." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to forgive what he did. You only have to stop carrying it. Hate is heavy. I've carried enough for both of us. You don't need to carry it anymore." Daniel cried silently. For the first time in his life, he understood what unconditional love looked like. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a tired old woman using what little strength she had left to free her son from a burden she never placed on him. Just then, there was another gentle knock on the door. Susan stepped inside. She held a folded piece of paper. "Margaret, I found this inside your diary." Margaret's expression changed. She immediately recognized it. "The last letter," she whispered. Daniel looked at her. "What letter?" Margaret smiled faintly. "I hoped you would never have to read it." Susan placed the folded page into Daniel's hand. Across the front, in Margaret's delicate handwriting, were 7 heartbreaking words. "Read this only after my heart stops beating." Daniel stared at the envelope, then looked at his mother. She smiled peacefully, as if she already knew the hardest goodbye had not yet come. Daniel stared at the folded letter. His hands trembled so badly that he almost dropped it. Across the front, his mother's familiar handwriting seemed almost alive. "Read this only after my heart stops beating." He looked at Margaret. "No," his voice cracked. "I'm not reading this." "Because you're not going anywhere," Margaret smiled. The same patient smile she had worn his entire life. "My sweet boy." "You always were stubborn."
The nurse entered quietly to check Margaret's medication. She adjusted the IV and smiled warmly. "You've made her very happy today." Daniel looked confused. "What do you mean?" The nurse hesitated. "Last night, she asked me if sons ever come back after they've been gone for a long time." Daniel closed his eyes. "And I told her," the nurse continued softly, "that children usually find their way home." Margaret reached for Daniel's hand. "I told you, storms always pass." He remembered. He was 7 years old again, curled beside her during a thunderstorm, believing nothing bad could happen while she was near. Only now, he was the frightened child, and she was still comforting him. That evening, Emma left briefly to bring coffee. For the first time all day, mother and son were alone. Daniel took a deep breath. "Mom, there was something in Grandpa's box." She looked at him. What was it? A photograph. He reached into his coat pocket. It showed Michael standing beside a little girl of about 5, his other daughter. She was laughing, holding his hand. "I've been thinking about her," Daniel said quietly. "She lost her father too." Margaret nodded. "Yes. And she grew up believing a different lie." Daniel looked down at the photograph. "I hated her." Margaret frowned. "You didn't even know her." "I know. But somehow, I blamed her for taking my father away." He shook his head slowly. "She was only a child." "So were you," Margaret answered gently. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had haunted him all day. "Mom, "Were you ever angry with me?" She answered immediately, "No." "Not once?" "No." "How?" Margaret smiled through tired eyes. "Because I knew the little boy inside you. The one who used to leave dandelions on my kitchen table.
The one who cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly. The one who believed I could fix everything. I never stopped seeing that little boy." Daniel lowered his head. "I stopped seeing you." Tears rolled down Margaret's cheeks. "Maybe. But now, you see me again." Late that night, Margaret fell asleep. Her breathing became slower, gentler. Daniel refused to leave. He moved his chair closer to the bed, still holding her hand, as if letting go might change everything. Around 3 a.m, Margaret stirred. Her eyes opened only halfway. She looked toward the window. "The birds," she whispered. Daniel listened. Outside, the first birds of morning had begun singing. "It's almost sunrise," he said. She smiled. "I always loved mornings." She slowly turned her head toward him. "Daniel." "Yes, Mom." "I need you to do something for me." "Anything." "When I'm gone, I don't want you to remember this room. I don't want you to remember the nursing home. I don't want you to remember these machines." He squeezed her hand. "What should I remember?" Margaret's eyes filled with light. "The cinnamon rolls." He blinked. "What?" She laughed softly. "Remember Saturday mornings, when you covered the kitchen in flour, when we burned the first batch every single Christmas, when we danced while washing dishes, when you insisted Superman could beat everyone." A tear slid down Daniel's face. "I remember." "Good. That's where I'll always be." The first rays of sunlight entered the room. Golden, warm, peaceful. Margaret watched them silently. Then she whispered, "So beautiful." Daniel leaned closer. "I love you, Mom." For the first time in decades, the words carried no guilt, no obligation, only truth. Margaret smiled. "I've been waiting a very long time to hear you say that again." She gently squeezed his fingers, barely enough for him to feel it. "I love you too, my little boy." A few moments later, her breathing slowed, then stopped. There was no struggle, no fear, only peace, as if she had simply fallen asleep, with her son's hand in hers, exactly where she had always wanted to be. Daniel remained there, still holding her hand, unable to move. The doctor quietly entered. He checked her pulse, then looked at Daniel with deep compassion. "I'm sorry." Daniel nodded. He couldn't speak, not because there were no words, because every word came 20 years too late. Emma stepped into the room moments later. She saw her grandmother, then her father. She wrapped her arms around him. Neither of them cried loudly. They simply stood together, watching the morning sun fill the room. Hours later. After the nurses had quietly prepared Margaret's belongings, Daniel noticed the folded letter still resting on the bedside table. The one she had written for him. The one she never wanted him to read while she was alive. With trembling hands, he picked it up. He looked at the handwriting one last time. Then, slowly, he broke the seal. For several seconds, Daniel simply stared at the letter. He couldn't bring himself to unfold it. It was the last thing his mother had ever written, the last conversation they would ever have. Only now, it would be one-sided. With trembling hands, he slowly opened the paper. My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, then my journey has ended. Please don't spend another day crying over all the years we lost. I never counted the years between us. I only counted the moments we still had. Daniel's tears fell onto the page. I know you're blaming yourself. Please don't. Life is complicated. People make decisions with the information they have. You were a little boy trying to understand grown-up pain. None of this was ever your fault. Daniel covered his face. His shoulders shook. The letter continued. There is something I've never told you. The day you were born, I made God one promise. I said, as long as my son grows up knowing he is loved, I can survive anything. God kept his part, and so did I. Daniel whispered through tears, You did. So much more than that. He continued reading. You often apologized for bringing me to Maple Grove, but I need you to know something. You didn't abandon me there. Loneliness began long before that, not because you stopped loving me, but because neither of us knew how to reach each other anymore. Daniel remembered every phone call he had ended quickly, every visit he postponed, every birthday celebrated next week. Not out of cruelty, out of the dangerous belief that there would always be another chance. The next paragraph stopped his heart. Promise me something. Don't let Emma carry regrets the way we did. Call her, visit her, tell her you love her until she becomes tired of hearing it. One day, she'll wish she could hear it just one more time. Emma quietly cried beside him. She had been reading over his shoulder. Without saying a word, she slipped her hand into his. Daniel turned the page. There was one final message. Short, simple, perfect. When you were 6 years old, you asked me to promise I'd never leave you. I told you I wouldn't. I kept that promise. Because love doesn't stay inside a body. It stays inside the people we leave behind. So whenever you laugh, whenever you forgive, whenever you choose kindness over pride, I'll still be there. Always. Love, Mum. Daniel folded the letter carefully. He pressed it against his heart, just as he had done with her diary. For the first time in 20 years, the weight inside his chest began to change. It didn't disappear. Grief never does. But guilt slowly gave way to gratitude. 3 months later, spring arrived. The snow melted. Flowers bloomed around Maple Grove. Daniel returned every Saturday, not because he had to, because he wanted to. He volunteered in the memory care unit. He read books to residents whose children rarely visited. He repaired broken wheelchairs. He planted flowers in the garden his mother had loved. Every visitor assumed he had worked there for years. No one knew. He was simply trying to honor one extraordinary woman. Frank spotted him one afternoon. So, you finally came home. Daniel smiled through moist eyes. I think I did. Frank nodded. Your mother would like that. Emma began visiting with him every weekend. Sometimes they brought homemade cinnamon rolls, Margaret's recipe. The first batch burned, just like always. They laughed. For the first time in a very long while, the laughter didn't feel guilty. It felt healing. One Saturday, Emma handed Daniel a small notebook. I started writing. He smiled. A diary? She nodded. No. A gratitude journal.
I don't want to wait until people are gone before I tell them what they mean to me. Daniel hugged his daughter, long, tight, without embarrassment. I love you. I love you too, Dad. 1 year later, Daniel stood beneath a large maple tree in the town cemetery. 2 headstones rested side by side. One belonged to Michael, the other to Margaret. He placed fresh white lilies beside his mother's grave. Then, to everyone's surprise, he placed a single red rose beside his father's. Emma looked at him. You forgave him? Daniel stared quietly at the stone. No, I forgave myself. Then he smiled, and I finally let him go. Before leaving, Daniel knelt beside his mother's grave. He took the old leather diary from his backpack. He didn't bury it. He didn't lock it away. Instead, he opened to the very first page, the one that had changed his life forever. He read it aloud. If my son ever reads these pages, he'll finally learn why I chose to let him hate me. Daniel looked toward the sky. The wind gently moved through the maple leaves, almost like a whisper. He smiled through tears. You don't have to protect me anymore, Mom. I know. I know everything now.
As he turned to walk away, Emma slipped her arm through his, exactly as he used to do with Margaret when he was a little boy. 3 generations, 1 story, 1 painful secret, and 1 extraordinary mother's love, strong enough to outlive lies, strong enough to outlive regret, strong enough to outlive death itself. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and let us know in the comments. Please give it a like, subscribe.